The outpost on Kepler 438b was as isolated as it got. A barren, rocky planet orbiting a dying red dwarf star. Its only notable feature was the faint shimmer of ice beneath its thin atmosphere, a cruel tease for any hope of life. It wasn't a place anyone chose to live. It was a place people endured for the sake of science. For Dr. Elias Venn, however, it had become home. Or at least as close to home as he'd known in years. Elias spent most days buried in his work, studying the remnants of ancient meteorites and scanning the skies for anomalies. His small team of researchers rotated shifts, but Elias often stayed, late into the night, poring over data that rarely yielded anything exciting. That changed one fateful evening when the alarms blared through the facility like a banshee's wail. "What is it?" Elias asked sharply, rushing to the main console, where his assistant Lila Chen stood wide-eyed. "Something big just entered the atmosphere," Lila replied, her voice trembling slightly. "It's not natural." Elias leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the screen. A streak of light tore across the horizon, growing brighter with each passing second. Whatever it wasn't slowing down, it was hurtling straight toward the surface. Within moments, the ground shook violently as the object slammed into the desert expanse several kilometers away from the outpost. "Get me suited up," Elias ordered without hesitation. "We need to check this out." The journey to the crash site felt endless. The rover bounced over jagged terrain, kicking up clouds of dust under the dim glow of the red dwarf sun. Elias sat in silence, gripping the controls tightly. He'd seen plenty of meteors and space debris during his time here, but none had triggered alarms like this. Something about it unsettled him. Something more than curiosity tugged at the edges of his mind. When they finally arrived, the scene before them defied explanation. What remained of the craft looked nothing like any human vessel Elias had ever encountered. Its sleek metallic surface seemed almost alive, rippling faintly under the weak sunlight. Jagged shards jutted outward from the wreckage and strange symbols glowed faintly along its hull. But what caught Elias's attention immediately were the figures lying motionless nearby. One was clearly an adult, taller than any human, with elongated limbs and translucent skin that shimmered faintly even in death. Nearby lay a smaller figure, unmistakably a child. Both appeared injured, their bodies battered and bruised. But the child still clung to life. Barely. "We need to help them," Elias said firmly, stepping out of the rover despite Lila's protests. "Are you insane? We don't know what these things are," she shouted after him, though her voice softened as she followed reluctantly. "They could be dangerous." "They're hurt," Elias shot back, crouching beside the child. "If we don't do something, they'll die." As he examined the smaller alien, a sudden wave of pressure washed over him. Not physical, but mental. Images flooded his mind, flashes of stars, planets, and emotions so raw, they left him gasping. Then came a voice, soft yet insistent, speaking directly into his thoughts. "Please, help my child." Elias froze, looking up to see the mother's glowing eyes locked onto his. Though her body lay broken, her consciousness burned with fierce determination. She reached out a trembling hand, brushing against his arm. The contact sent another surge of images through his mind, memories of tenderness, loss, and desperation. "She's communicating," Elias murmured, turning to Lila. "She wants us to save her child." Lila hesitated, visibly torn between fear and compassion. "Even if we wanted to, how would we even begin? Their biology, it's completely alien." "I don't know," Elias admitted, his gaze returning to the child. "But I have to try." Back at the outpost, Elias set up a makeshift medical bay in one of the labs. Using scanners and diagnostic tools designed for human patients, he began piecing together what he could about the child's physiology. What he found astonished him. The young alien's body wasn't purely organic. It was a hybrid of flesh and machinery, seamlessly integrated in ways that defied current human understanding. Delicate circuits pulsed beneath translucent skin, while organs that resembled nothing terrestrial worked tirelessly to keep the child alive. "This is impossible," Lila whispered, watching as Elias carefully patched a tear in the child's chest cavity. "How does something like this exist?" "I don't think how matters right now," Elias replied, his focus unwavering. "What matters is keeping them stable." Despite his best efforts, progress was slow. Every step forward revealed new complications, forcing Elias to improvise constantly. Supplies dwindled quickly, and fatigue began to take its toll. Still he pressed on, driven by the unrelenting presence of the mother's voice in his mind. "Repair my child," she urged repeatedly. "I will give you anything." At first, Elias dismissed the promise as a trick of his imagination, or perhaps a side effect of stress. But as days turned into nights, strange occurrences began happening around him. Tools he needed would appear exactly where he required them, seemingly moving on their own. Solutions to complex problems came to him in bursts of clarity as though guided by an unseen hand. Each time the mother's voice grew stronger, more insistent. "You're doing this, aren't you?" Elias muttered aloud one night, staring at a newly repaired component he swore hadn't been there moments earlier. "I am helping," the voice confirmed. "And when you finish, I will reward you." Elias frowned, unsure whether to feel grateful or wary. Part of him wanted to ask what kind of reward she had in mind, but another part feared the answer. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, determined to see it through no matter the cost. By the 5th day, the child's condition had stabilized enough for Elias to turn his attention to the mother. Her injuries were far worse than the child's, her body barely clinging to life. Yet despite her frailty, her resolve never wavered. Whenever Elias approached her, she bombarded him with images of gratitude and warnings. "Beware," she cautioned one evening as he adjusted a stabilizing device around her torso. "My enemies seek us, they will come." "Who are your enemies?" Elias asked, though he doubted he'd get a clear response. Her reply came in fragmented visions, shadowy figures descending from the sky, weapons firing beams of energy, entire worlds consumed by fire. Elias recoiled, shaken by the intensity of the message. "Is that why you crashed here?" he asked softly. "Were you running from them?" The mother didn't answer directly, but her silence spoke volumes. Elias realized then that he wasn't just repairing two strangers. He was stepping into a conflict far greater than himself. And yet, despite the danger, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. As dawn broke over the desolate landscape outside, Elias returned to the lab, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Whether out of duty, curiosity, or some deeper instinct, he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't stop until the child, and perhaps the mother, was saved. Little did he know the true test was only beginning. Days turned into weeks as Elias continued his work, pouring every ounce of energy into repairing the alien child. Each day brought new challenges, biomechanical systems that defied logic, injuries that seemed to worsen despite his efforts, and moments when he doubted whether he could succeed at all. Yet through it all, the mother's voice remained a constant presence in his mind, urging him forward with promises of reward. "You are close," she whispered during one particularly grueling session. "Soon, you will have everything you desire." Elias paused, his hands hovering over the delicate circuitry embedded in the child's chest. He had long since stopped questioning how she communicated with him or why her words carried such weight. Instead, he focused on deciphering what drove her desperation and what kind of reward she kept hinting at. "What do you mean by everything I desire?" he finally asked aloud, though he wasn't sure if she would answer. Her response came in fragmented images this time. Visions of wealth beyond imagination, knowledge that unlocked the secrets of the universe, power that could reshape entire worlds. But mixed among these tantalizing promises were glimpses of something deeper: peace, fulfillment, purpose. For a moment, Elias felt an overwhelming sense of longing, as though the very fabric of his soul was being pulled towards something just out of reach. "I can give you what your heart craves," the mother assured him. "But first you must finish." The promise lingered in his mind, gnawing at the edges of his focus. At night, when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, Elias found himself staring at the ceiling of his quarters, imagining what it might feel like to have every wish granted. Would he ask for riches? Fame? Or perhaps something simpler? A chance to undo past mistakes, to reconnect with loved ones he'd lost along the way? Despite the allure of the mother's offer, Elias couldn't ignore the growing unease that shadowed his progress. Strange occurrences became more frequent as he worked. Tools moved on their own, appearing exactly where he needed them before he even realized he needed them. Complex problems solved themselves almost magically, leaving him with solutions he barely understood. Even Lila noticed the changes. "Something weird is going on," she said one evening as they reviewed data together. "I've never seen anything like this before. It's like someone or something is helping you." Elias hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Maybe it's just coincidence," he offered weakly, avoiding her gaze. Lila raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. She had grown quieter in recent days, retreating into herself as the weight of their situation settled over her. Though, she still assisted Elias when necessary. Her initial enthusiasm had faded, replaced by a cautious distance. Meanwhile, the mother grew weaker. Her once luminous form dimmed noticeably, her translucent skin taking on a grayish hue. Despite her declining condition, her determination never faltered. Whenever Elias approached her, she bombarded him with waves of gratitude and warnings. "Hurry," she urged one night as he adjusted a stabilizing device around her torso. "Time is running out." "For who?" Elias asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "For you? For me? For whoever's chasing us?" Her reply came in fragmented flashes, shadowy figures descending from the sky, weapons firing beams of energy, entire planets consumed by fire. Elias recoiled, shaken by the intensity of the vision. He realized then that they weren't just dealing with a mother trying to save her child. They were caught in the middle of something far larger, far more dangerous. As the repairs progressed, Elias began uncovering unsettling details about the child's physiology. Beneath the intricate layers of organic tissue and machinery lay components designed for purposes far beyond survival. Embedded within its systems were traces of advanced weaponry and data processing capabilities, far exceeding what should exist in a young being. The realization struck him like a blow. "This isn't just a child," Elias muttered under his breath, examining a cluster of circuits that pulsed faintly with energy. "It's something else." Lila glanced up from her notes, frowning. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." Elias trailed off, struggling to find the right words. This kid wasn't born, it was built, designed for something specific. Lila's eyes widened in alarm. "Are you saying it's some kind of weapon?" "Not just a weapon," Elias corrected grimly. "A diplomat, maybe. A negotiator. Something meant to bridge gaps between civilizations or destroy them." The implications weighed heavily on him. If the child truly was a tool of war, then saving it might unleash forces Elias couldn't possibly comprehend. Yet abandoning the project now would leave the mother's sacrifice meaningless and doom the child to certain death. Torn between duty and morality, Elias wrestled with the enormity of his decision. One evening, after another long day of work, Elias sat alone in the lab, staring at the glowing form of the child lying motionless on the operating table. The mother's voice echoed softly in his mind, repeating the same refrain over and over again. "Finish, and I will grant your wish." He closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him. What did he truly want? Wealth and power held little appeal. He'd spent years chasing scientific breakthroughs, not material gain. Knowledge intrigued him, but only if it served a greater purpose. And yet, beneath all his ambitions, there was a deeper yearning, a longing for connection, for meaning, for something that transcended the isolation of his solitary existence. Before he could dwell further on the thought, a sudden noise startled him. Turning, he saw the mother standing, or rather floating, nearby, her weakened body propped upright by some unseen force. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, filled with both gratitude and sorrow. "You question my motives," she said, her voice clearer than ever before. "You fear what my child may become." Elias nodded slowly. "How can I not? You're asking me to repair something that could change the course of history, for better or worse." The mother hesitated, her form flickering faintly. Then with a wave of her hand she projected a vision into his mind. He saw civilizations rising and falling, wars erupting and subsiding, countless lives touched by the actions of beings like her child. Some thrived under its influence, others perished. But through it all, one truth remained constant. Change was inevitable, no matter how painful or destructive. "My people sought balance," she explained. "We created tools to unite, to protect, to preserve, but we also sowed seeds of destruction. My child carries the potential for both. The choice lies with those who wield it." "And if I don't finish?" Elias asked quietly. "Then all is lost," she replied simply. "For me, for my child, and for the hope we carry." Elias sat in silence, weighing her words. Part of him wanted to walk away, to let fate take its course. But another part, the part that had driven him to pursue science, to seek answers in the unknown, knew he couldn't abandon them now. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, he had to see this through. With renewed resolve, Elias returned to the operating table, his hands steady despite the storm raging inside him. As he worked, the mother's voice grew softer, almost melodic, filling the room with a sense of calm. For the first time in weeks, Elias felt a glimmer of peace, not because he knew what awaited him, but because he trusted that he was doing the right thing. Elias's hands trembled as he tightened the final connection in the child's biomechanical system. The delicate circuitry pulsed faintly under his touch, glowing with a soft, otherworldly light. For weeks, he had poured every ounce of his energy into this task, navigating challenges that defied logic and tested the limits of his understanding. Now, as he stepped back from the operating table, he felt a strange mix of triumph and unease. The child lay motionless, its translucent skin shimmering faintly in the dim light of the lab. Though Elias had stabilized its vital systems, there was no guarantee it would awaken, or what might happen if it did. Nearby, the mother hovered weakly, her once brilliant form now faded and fragile. Her presence filled the room with an almost tangible weight, her voice echoing softly in Elias's mind. "You have done well," she said, her tone tinged with both gratitude and sorrow. "But your work is not yet complete." "What do you mean?" Elias asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've repaired everything I can." "Not everything," the mother replied cryptically. "There is one final step, a choice only you can make, before." Elias could press further. The lights in the lab flickered, plunging the room into momentary darkness. When they returned, the air seemed heavier, charged with an electric tension that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. The mother's form brightened slightly, her glowing eyes fixed intently on him. "Look deeper," she urged. "See the truth of my child." Confused but compelled, Elias turned his attention back to the child. Using a handheld scanner, he began running diagnostics, searching for anything he might have missed. At first, the readings appeared normal, stable energy levels, functioning organs, intact neural pathways. But as he adjusted the settings, something unusual caught his eye. Buried deep within the child's systems were layers of data unlike anything he'd encountered before. It wasn't just machinery. It was information, an intricate web of knowledge encoded directly into the child's being. "What is this?" Elias murmured, scrolling through streams of alien symbols and diagrams. "It's like a library, a repository," the mother corrected gently. "A collection of wisdom gathered over millennia. My child carries the essence of our people, their hopes, their failures, their dreams. It is both a gift and a burden. Elias frowned, struggling to process what she was saying. So this isn't just a child, it's a living archive. More than that, the mother replied. It is a bridge between worlds, a vessel meant to unite or divide depending on how it is used. Within it lies the power to heal or to destroy. The implications hit Elias like a tidal wave. He thought back to the weapons-grade components he had, uncovered earlier, the advanced capabilities embedded in the child's design. If unleashed without care, such power could wreak havoc on a cosmic scale. Yet the potential for good was equally immense, a chance to share knowledge, foster alliances, and prevent conflicts before they began. But why me? Elias asked, his voice trembling. Why entrust something like this to a stranger? Because you see beyond fear, the mother answered simply. You choose compassion when others would turn away. That is rare among your kind, and among mine. Her words stirred something deep within Elias, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Still, doubt lingered at the edges of his mind. Could he be trusted with such responsibility? Was he capable of wielding or even guiding such immense power? As the hours passed, Elias delved deeper into the child's systems, uncovering more of the hidden repository. Each layer revealed new insights, advanced medical techniques, sustainable energy, solutions methods for terraforming barren planets. There were also darker elements, blueprints for devastating weapons, strategies for psychological manipulation, tools designed to exploit weaknesses in rival civilizations. The dichotomy left Elias reeling, torn between awe and dread. Lila entered, the lab quietly carrying a tray of food she had prepared for him. She set it down on a nearby counter, watching as Elias scrolled through endless streams of alien data. You look like you're unraveling a puzzle, she said cautiously, breaking the silence. That's one way to put it, Elias replied, rubbing his temples. This kid, they're carrying a treasure trove of knowledge. Enough to change the course of history, but it's not all good. Some of it scares me. Lila hesitated, glancing at the child lying motionless on the table. What happens when they wake up? What are they supposed to do with all that? I don't know, Elias admitted. That's the problem. Their purpose seems to depend entirely on who controls them or influences them. And you think you can guide them? Lila asked, skepticism creeping into her voice. Elias, you're brilliant, but this is bigger than you. Bigger than any of us. Elias didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the child, studying the subtle rise and fall of its chest. Whatever doubts he harbored, one thing was clear. Abandoning the project now would leave the mother's sacrifice meaningless. And though the stakes terrified him, walking away wasn't an option. Not anymore. Later that night, as Elias sat alone in the lab, the mother approached him once more. Her form flickered faintly, her energy waning with each passing moment. Despite her frailty, her voice remained steady, filled with quiet resolve. You must decide, she said, her words cutting through the stillness. Will you awaken my child knowing the risks? Or will you let them sleep forever, sparing the universe the consequences of their existence? Elias stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, suffocating in its enormity. On one hand, awakening the child could unleash forces he couldn't control, potentially leading to chaos or destruction. On the other, leaving them dormant would rob the universe of untold possibilities, extinguishing a beacon of hope before it had a chance to shine. I don't know what to do, Elias confessed, his voice cracking under the strain. How can I make a choice like this? The mother floated closer, placing a translucent hand on his shoulder. Though her touch was ethereal, it carried a warmth that soothed his frayed nerves. No one can prepare you for this, she said softly, but remember this. My child is neither savior nor destroyer. They are a reflection of those who shape them. Choose wisely, and they may bring balance. Choose poorly, and they may bring ruin. With those words, the mother's form dimmed further, her presence fading into the ether. Elias watched as she dissolved into shimmering particles of light, leaving behind only silence. In the days that followed, Elias wrestled with the mother's final message. He spent hours poring over the child's systems, analyzing every detail, searching for clues that might guide his decision. Yet no matter how much he learned, the answer eluded him. The child's potential, for good or ill, remained a paradox, a double-edged sword hanging precariously over the future. Finally, after a sleepless night spent staring at the stars outside the lab window, Elias reached a conclusion. He returned to the operating table, his expression resolute. Whatever the outcome, he knew one thing for certain: the child deserved a chance to exist, to grow, to shape their own destiny. Taking a deep breath, Elias activated the final sequence. The child's body shuddered slightly, then stilled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly their glowing eyes fluttered open, meeting Elias's gaze with a mixture of curiosity and innocence. For better or worse, the journey was just beginning. The child's eyes glowed faintly, like twin stars emerging from the void. Elias stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat as he stared into those luminous orbs. For a moment, there was only silence, a fragile stillness that seemed to stretch endlessly. Then the child moved. A small hand reached out, trembling slightly, and brushed against Elias's arm. The touch sent a jolt through him, not painful, but electric, as though the child's very essence was probing his soul. Images flooded his mind once more, flashes of distant worlds, ancient civilizations, and emotions so raw they left him gasping. But this time, the visions were different. They weren't fragmented or chaotic, they were coherent, almost conversational. "Who are you?" the child asked, their voice soft yet resonant, echoing directly in Elias's thoughts. I'm Elias," he stammered, struggling to find words. "I helped repair you." The child tilted their head, studying him with an intensity that felt far beyond their apparent age. "Why did you help me?" Elias hesitated, unsure how to explain something he barely understood himself. "Because your mother asked me to," he finally said. "She wanted you to live." At the mention of the mother, the child's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Their glowing eyes dimmed slightly, filled with a sorrow that seemed impossibly profound for such a young being. "She is gone," the child stated simply, their voice tinged with both grief and acceptance. "I feel her absence." "Yes," Elias replied, softly, his own heart aching at the memory of the mother's final moments. "She sacrificed herself to save you." The child fell silent, their gaze drifting toward the ceiling, as though searching for something unseen. Elias watched them carefully, unsure what to expect next. Would they remember their purpose? Would they understand the immense responsibility resting on their shoulders? Over the next few days, the child began to explore their surroundings, moving, cautiously but with growing confidence. They absorbed everything around them with an insatiable curiosity, asking endless questions about the outpost, the planet, and humanity itself. Each interaction revealed new facets of their personality: intelligence far beyond their years, a deep sense of empathy, and an almost childlike wonder at the simplest things. Yet beneath their innocence lay glimpses of something far more complex. Occasionally, when the child touched an object or interacted with technology, strange phenomena occurred: tools rearranging themselves, data streams appearing out of nowhere, even brief flickers of light and sound that defied explanation. It became clear that the child's abilities extended far beyond mere observation. They could manipulate their environment in ways Elias couldn't fully comprehend. "What are you?" Lila asked one evening as she and Elias observed the child from a distance. "Are you human? Alien? Something else entirely?" The child turned to face her, their glowing eyes locking onto hers. "I am all things," they replied simply, "and nothing. My purpose is not yet defined." Lila shivered involuntarily, stepping back slightly. "That's unsettling." "It's also true," Elias interjected, his tone thoughtful. They're like a blank slate, a canvas waiting to be painted. What they become depends on how we guide them. And if we guide them wrong? Lila countered sharply. What then? Do you really think we're equipped to handle something like this? Elias didn't have an answer. Instead, he turned his attention back to the child, who was now examining a holographic display of the solar system. Their fingers traced the orbits of planets, pausing briefly at Kepler 438b before continuing outward. Do you understand what this is? Elias asked gently, pointing to the display. Yes, the child replied. It is a map of your home, a fragile world orbiting a dying star. Their words struck a chord within Elias. Fragile. It was the perfect word to describe not just the planet but humanity itself. He wondered if the child saw the same fragility in every civilization they encountered, a shared vulnerability that transcended species and borders. As the days passed, Elias found himself grappling with the enormity of the choice before him. The mother's promise lingered in his mind, a tantalizing offer that grew harder to ignore. She had said she would grant him anything he desired, but at what cost? Would fulfilling his deepest wish come at the expense of the child's future? Or worse, the future of countless others? One night, unable to sleep, Elias wandered into the lab where the child sat quietly, gazing at the stars outside the window. Their translucent skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, casting a soft glow across the room. Can't sleep? Elias asked, breaking the silence. The child turned to look at him, their expression unreadable. I do not require rest as you do, but I sense your unrest. You are troubled. Elias sighed, pulling up a chair beside them. I made a promise to your mother, to help you, but I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. There is no right or wrong, the child responded. Only choices and their consequences. That's what scares me, Elias admitted. Your potential, for good or bad, is limitless. I don't want to make a mistake that could hurt people or entire worlds. The child studied him for a long moment before speaking again. You fear power because you do not trust yourself to wield it wisely. But power is neither good nor evil. It is the intent behind it that matters. Elias nodded slowly, absorbing their words. So what should I do? How do I ensure you'll use your abilities for the right reasons? I cannot answer that, the child said softly, for I am shaped by those who guide me. If you teach me compassion, I will act with kindness. If you teach me fear, I will act with caution. If you teach me greed, I will act with selfishness. The simplicity of their response hit Elias like a thunderclap. The child wasn't inherently good or evil. They were a reflection of the influences around them. And that meant the responsibility rested squarely on his shoulders. The following morning, Elias gathered Lila and the rest of the team to discuss the situation. Tensions ran high as they debated the best course of action. Some argued that the child should remain confined to the outpost, isolated until they could determine the full extent of their capabilities. Others believed they should send a message to Earth, alerting authorities to the child's existence and requesting guidance. We can't keep them locked up forever, Lila argued passionately. They're not a prisoner, they're a person. A highly advanced person, sure, but still a person. And what happens when someone decides to exploit them? Another researcher countered. We've seen what they're capable of. Imagine what governments or corporations would do if they got their hands on them. Elias listened silently, weighing each argument carefully. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady, despite the turmoil inside him. The mother entrusted us with her child for a reason, he said firmly. She believed in our ability to guide them wisely. Sending them away or locking them up would betray that trust. We owe it to her, and to them, to try. His words silenced the room, leaving only the hum of machinery in the background. Slowly, one by one, the researchers nodded in agreement. With the decision made, Elias turned his focus to preparing the child for the journey ahead. Using the knowledge stored within their systems, he began teaching them about humanity, their strengths, their flaws, their boundless capacity for both creation and destruction. Together they explored concepts of morality, empathy, and responsibility, laying the foundation for the values the child would carry into the universe. Through it all, the mother's promise loomed large in Elias's mind. One evening, as he worked late in the lab, the child approached him unexpectedly. "You have done much for me," they said softly. "Now it is time for you to claim your reward." Elias froze, his heart pounding. I don't know what to ask for." "Then let me show you," the child replied, placing a hand on his forehead. A wave of warmth washed over him, filling his mind with images of clarity and purpose. In that moment, he realized what he truly wanted, not wealth or power, but understanding. Understanding of himself, of others, of the interconnectedness of all life. When the vision faded, Elias found himself smiling, not out of relief or joy, but out of gratitude. The child had given him exactly what he needed without asking for anything in return. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. The child nodded solemnly. "Our paths diverge now, but remember, you have shaped me as much as I have shaped you." As dawn broke over the desolate landscape, Elias watched the child board a reconstructed ship, ready to forge their own destiny among the stars. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: the choice he had made was the right one. The reconstructed alien vessel gleamed under the faint glow of Kepler 438b's dying sun, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. Elias stood a few meters away, watching as the child prepared to leave. The ship hummed softly, its systems coming, alive with an energy that seemed almost sentient. Around them, the barren desert stretched endlessly, a silent witness to the culmination of weeks of struggle, sacrifice, and discovery. "You're sure about this?" Lila asked quietly, her voice tinged with unease. She stood beside Elias, arms crossed tightly against the chill of the morning air. "Once they're gone, we'll have no way of knowing where they'll end up, or what they'll do." Elias nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the child. "I'm not sure about anything anymore," he admitted. "But keeping them here wouldn't be fair, to them or to us. They were never meant for confinement." Lila sighed, glancing at the child who was now standing near the open hatch of the ship. Their glowing eyes reflected the pale light, filled with a quiet determination that belied their youthful appearance. Despite everything she had seen, their abilities, their potential, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness at their departure. For all their otherworldly nature, there was something undeniably human about them. Curiosity, vulnerability, hope. "Do you think they'll remember us?" she asked softly. "They'll remember more than we realize," Elias replied. "They carry pieces of everyone they've met within them. That's part of who they are." As the final preparations were completed, the child approached Elias one last time. Their movements were deliberate, each step carrying the weight of countless futures yet unwritten. Stopping just inches away, they tilted their heads slightly, studying him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "You have given me life," they said, their voice resonating gently in his mind. "And purpose. I will carry your teachings with me wherever I go." Elias swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet their gaze. "I didn't give you purpose," he corrected. "You found it yourself. All I did was point you in the right direction." The child smiled faintly, a gesture so subtle it might have been imagined. "Perhaps, but without your guidance I would not be ready to face what lies ahead." For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken emotions: gratitude, fear, hope. Then the child extended a hand, palm facing upward. A soft glow emanated from their skin, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. "Before I go, I must fulfill my mother's promise," they said. "What is your wish?" Elias hesitated, his thoughts swirling. He had spent days pondering this very question, wrestling with desires both selfish and altruistic: wealth, fame, power, all paled in comparison to the clarity he had gained through the child's earlier vision. What he truly wanted wasn't something tangible, it was understanding. Understanding of himself, of others, of the universe, and his place within it. "I already have what I need," he said finally, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "You've shown me that." The child regarded him silently for a moment before nodding. "Then take this instead. A gift not for yourself, but for those who follow." With a wave of their hand, the child conjured a sphere of light, hovering inches above their palm. It pulsed faintly, radiating warmth and energy. Carefully, they placed it into Elias's hands. The moment it touched his skin, visions flooded his mind, images of distant worlds, advanced technologies, solutions to problems humanity had yet to solve. But unlike the chaotic bursts of information he had experienced before, these were clear and structured, designed to be shared. "This knowledge will help guide your people," the child explained. "Use it wisely." Elias stared at the sphere, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he held. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling. "For everything." As the child stepped back toward the ship, Elias felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Part of him wanted to call out, to ask them to stay just a little longer. But deep down he knew this was how it had to be. The child wasn't meant for this desolate outpost or even for Earth. They belonged among the stars, a bridge between worlds, a beacon of possibility. "Wait," Lila suddenly called out, rushing forward. She stopped just short of the child, holding out a small device, a data drive containing records of their time together. "Take this," she said quickly. It's a piece of us, something to remember us by." The child accepted the drive, examining it curiously before tucking it safely into their robes. "I will cherish it always," they promised, their voice warm with gratitude. With one final glance at Elias and Lila, the child turned and entered the ship. The hatch closed behind them with a soft hiss, sealing them inside. Moments later, the vessel began to rise, its engines emitting a low hum that grew louder with each passing second. Dust swirled around the landing site as the ship ascended higher and higher, until it disappeared into the crimson sky. Back at the outpost, Elias and Lila stood side by side, staring at the empty horizon. The silence between them was profound, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. "What happens now?" Lila asked eventually, her voice barely audible. "We wait," Elias replied simply, "and we prepare. The knowledge they left us, it's going to change everything." He glanced down at the glowing sphere in his hands, its light pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. Already, he could feel the weight of responsibility settling over him. This wasn't just a gift. It was a legacy, a trust passed from one species to another. And though the path ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, Elias knew one thing for certain: humanity would never be the same. Weeks turned into months as Elias and his team worked tirelessly to decode and share the knowledge contained within the sphere. Breakthroughs came rapidly: advancements in medicine, renewable energy, artificial intelligence, and interstellar travel. News of their discoveries spread across Earth, sparking debates, excitement, and fear in equal measure. Governments scrambled to adapt, corporations raced to capitalize, and ordinary people marveled at the possibilities unfolding before them. Through it all, Elias remained grounded, guided by the lessons he had learned from the child. He spoke often of compassion, empathy, and the importance of using knowledge responsibly. Though some dismissed his words as idealistic, others listened and began to dream of a future shaped not by greed or fear, but by cooperation and understanding. 1. Evening. As Elias sat alone in the lab, gazing at the stars outside the window, he felt a familiar presence brush against his mind. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. "Are you still watching?" he thought silently, smiling faintly. In response, a single star flickered brightly in the distance as though winking at him. Elias chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Good luck out there." he murmured, raising his cup of coffee in a mock toast. Wherever you are. As the red dwarf sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the outpost, Elias allowed himself a moment of peace. The journey had been long and uncertain, but it had led him to something greater than he could have imagined, a glimpse of the interconnectedness of all life. And though the child was gone, their influence lingered, not just in the knowledge they had shared, but in the hearts and minds of those they had touched. Somewhere among the stars, the child continued their voyage, carrying fragments of humanity within them. And somewhere on a distant planet orbiting a dying sun, a man named Elias Venn carried fragments of the cosmos within him. Their paths may have diverged, but their legacies were forever intertwined.